Hey guys, I'm almost reluctant to make a video today for the topic that I'm referring to actually, so let me do this, and then I'm debating not doing a few videos for a little while, at least videos on me imparting my worldview or knowledge, just for a little bit, because I want to, and I'll post more charity videos because we have a lot going on. And the reason for that is kind of something, as the reason I say that is kind of the reason I'm making the video, which is a bit ironic. So I'm out here in beautiful, beautiful forest here in Hamburg. Just my type of weather. I grew up in this weather, unbelievably the most familiar weather to me. As growing up on the coast of the North Sea as I did, is fog and rain and drizzle is the word I was going to say, and I combined it with rain. Drizzling, as we say in England as well, so quite at home in this. Yesterday I posted on most of my platforms a thing about ego traps, and ego traps are a very important part of being peaceful, being happy. You have to know the ego traps, you really do. And I said that one of my worst ego traps of late was veganism, but actually the worst ego trap for me ever, and the worst ego I've ever developed, is my spiritual ego. To the degree my spiritual ego gave me no freedom and made me feel so ill. And I'll explain why this happened, and I'm not claiming I've left this ego behind either. This is not what I'm doing. I'm stating my journey with that, and my journey dealing with that, and why it was manifesting itself and growing based on the life I was living. The vegan example is a great one, because I know a lot of you are vegan, and I think that's important. So when I went vegan at first, I went for very pure and loving motivations. Upon looking and reflecting upon how I was with veganism, I definitely had an attachment to it, which created a vego, as I call it, my vegan ego. And by that, what I mean is I would judge others not at my level. And even living with the Maasai, who are far more vegan than any vegan, they do less damage to the planet and to animal life than anyone who is vegan in Europe and America and Australia and the East. Anybody, they do far less damage, because they take one life that is eating in arid land that doesn't need to be cultivated, and they are feeding many people with it. There's no pesticide, there's no electricity, there's no travelling, there's no roadicide, there's nothing. There's just this one animal that they love dearly. And then they kill for survival because they love their children and themselves more than that love, and that is the survival they live in. If they leave the natural habitat of the Maasai where they live, out in the arid areas, most of the Maasai cultivate, and in cultivating they actually do kill more animals. So it boils into that speciesist debate. Is it better that they kill one cow living on arid land, or is it better they eat rice and beans and kill lots of rats and mice and insects and birds by using lots of roadicide and so on and so forth? It's a very interesting topic, and one I knew about because I'm logical, but I just couldn't do because I'd attached to the veganism. And the vegan journey is definitely the highest moral path, but it is not a spiritual path in and of itself if you attach to it. Because in attaching to it, you form a spiritual ego, or you form an ego based around the input of yourself to the world. Now, if you're crawling inside with a want to defend veganism, you're going at the wrong person. I've stated here clearly, veganism is the highest moral road. It's the best thing for the environment, predominantly when you're in the Western world, although eating local should be looked at as well, because some persons eating local, etc., are actually doing less harm to the environment too, because they're using less plastic, they're using less import. It's a very complex topic. So what I realized as well, in among all of that, is I was judging others, which meant I'd elevated myself beyond them, which means I'd formed a killer vegan ego. And I've released that, and I apologise to anybody I was ever rude to whilst in that space. I'm human, and I'm growing, and I'm developing with every given day, and I hope you all are too. And I hope you can develop forgiveness as well, because it's an important faculty. And if I've ever gone down your throat not understanding what you were saying because I was not listening, because I was just locked on that this is the solution, then I must, as I say, apologise for that. I'll do a video about my diet in due course. I then have a problem, because then my awareness shifted to my spiritual ego, and this took a lot of releasing. And actually recently, in the last week, a new friend of mine who I'd had bad words with in the past was used by God to make me let go. Very unusual situation for me, and I was sitting right here when it happened. That's why I've chose to sit here again. I have never served God in all my life until I went to Tanzania. And due to that, for all I had realized that I had created a very destructive ego back in Europe based around self-serving pleasures. Based around the flesh, the gluttonous, sexually immoral aspect of indulgence in the fleshly pleasures. Enjoying them, enjoying being intimate with your wife is not bad. No one should ever say it is. But using it to make yourself feel good, constantly, daily as a pursuit, is a horrific ego. And I cracked that one, and I realized it was a very dark ego that I'd manifest inside society. And all of a sudden God reached out and he pulled me out of it, and he said, hey, I've always been here waiting for you to realize this stuff. Now let me lift you out of there. And as he did, I said, in mass states of overwhelmed feeling of humility, as he approached me with this, I said, let me be my highest good. You take control of my life. Take control and let it be of some benefit, because it hasn't up to now. In doing that, he led me to Tanzania. And he led me to be filled with his desires for children I didn't even know existed once upon a time. And he filled me with these very deep, clear moral desires to help, to serve others, to live in line morally and with my manifestations and my desires with Christian principle. Hold on, a dog's come. Hello. So, a dog came. I'm being haunted by dogs today. I can see others coming as well. So let's hope they don't haunt me too much. I was sitting here when I released this spiritual ego, and I'd created it because I felt, okay, I'm in line now, I'm serving God. But just because a man or a woman is serving God doesn't mean to say they're free of ego. Even if their life is selfless, they can be roaring with ego. And the very worst ego is the type that doesn't identify itself as being there, which is the spiritual ego in the most part, or egos associated to isms of a higher morality such as veganism. Because when somebody is showing off, to the outward viewer, it's very obvious that someone is showing off. But to the person showing off, it often is not. That's the nature of being trapped by your ego. However, if someone is showing off, the average person can look and say, man, look at the ego on him. You know, they've got this brash outer exterior, you know, pink hair sticking up all over, big gold chains. It's very obvious what's going on. You know, this is just, I'm saying expression in that way. It's very clear sometimes when you look in what's happening. But when you look in on someone who is sharing spiritual information or serving God or living in line with God, or trying to live in line with God, it's very easy to presume that they are thus a set example to follow, but they are not. They all have an ego. Now, I set about trying to show people one thing: how I came to understand myself by being in the present moment and releasing the lower nature expression of myself to the best of my ability. Now, my lower nature expression is how I perceived it, is flesh, the fleshly impulses of pleasure dominating my actions, motivations, and decision making. And in being in the present moment, I felt the light of God come down to me because I acknowledged those things as wrong, and I said, I repented. I said, this is wrong. I know this is wrong. There's got to be more to life than this. And in doing that, the the change happened, and I felt like I wanted to do something more. Now, I went into what I was doing pretty good with my ego because I wasn't in any public view. I went to Tanzania with my own savings, and I helped a lot of people before anybody even knew where I was and who I was. And I enjoyed that the most out of my whole journey in Tanzania. For all I was helping less people, there was a freedom because there was no burden of a public image of people looking upon me. And as soon as I started pointing a camera at myself, I started to create an image because I was looking at how people were perceiving me and the work that I was doing and the things that I was saying. So I'm immediately externalizing and looking in on myself. I'm starting to form something there. In time, I formed a very dreadful spiritual ego where I felt holier than thou at some points, where instead of meeting somebody who is deep inside the habituation of their flesh and only hoping to share what got me out of there, I would judge them and feel, oh, this, I've been there, what a horrible place to be, why don't you stop doing that? As if somehow when I was doing it, I was any different, And I started, because I was attaching to what I was doing with God, bit by bit, I started adding little bricks to my spiritual ego. And by adding little bricks to my spiritual ego, I also started adding ego traps that you can't believe. Now, I never once looked, it's one thing I didn't do, I didn't look at others and think, I am holier than you, I am more in line with God than you. But what happened was many people reflected back to me and said, you're so in line, you're so, and they'd seek my counsel, they'd seek my guidance, they'd seek my knowledge, and they'd come and ask me questions in my email, help me with this, help me with that, and all I ever used to say is, hey, you have the answer inside you. I don't have an answer for you. I don't. The answer's inside you, and it's inside messengers like Jesus Christ. And people would say, but I'm using the Bible and I still can't apply it. And I'd say, well, hang on to that and understand that message of service and Christ and love and light, and try doing these practices to get still enough to heal your body and see if you have this happening with the sacred secretion. And that is a working with inside all of our bodies, the renewal of the fabric of consciousness inside us. I had responses from many people saying, hey, it worked. It worked. I now understand that this sacred science is real. And it's not even a sacred science, it's just a reality of who we are. It's just the reality of the higher, lower nature state that human beings are. But as time went on and people were asking me, I started getting this sense, hey, I know more than them, because all my interactions were predominantly people coming to me without the knowledge. And secretly, the ego started in laying more bricks. It started building itself further up and saying, hey, you know more than them. Maybe you are quite special. Maybe you are quite wise. Maybe you have touched on enlightenment. And bit by bit it got worse. And now the worst traps came in. The worst traps came in by all means was the physical actions and habits I was forming, I deemed to be necessary for my godly relationship all of a sudden, such as recording YouTube videos. I felt every day a pressure because videos of mine that went viral gave the charity the resources to provide for the children. Never did I realize the videos that went viral, I spoke from my heart because this knowledge only came to me when I started living in line with what Jesus Christ asked us to live with. Only when I did that was that knowledge brought to me with, I deem, the Holy Spirit. And in sharing that knowledge, I should have remembered the root of it was God, which means the root of the money coming to the children was God, because it started inside me with a relationship with God. But what I did was, I started it with me and the video sharing the knowledge. And thus I felt this desperation inside me. And this desperation inside me was that I have to keep posting, and it was a miserable place. And I told my friends, I told people I was working with about it, but they couldn't get it, they didn't grasp it, because most of them have no idea about what I was talking about, because it's an individual experience. And I was saying, I feel so tortured trying to provide YouTube content. I feel trapped by it. I said it so many times to my trustees with the charity, etc. But nobody grasped what I was saying, and rightly so, it's my journey. But I felt trapped because I had become trapped by a new ego. And I started feeling, if I don't do these videos, how is God going to get the resources to the children? Meanwhile, around me in Tanzania, I see charities failing. And this emphasized what I was feeling. It made my delusion real. And I started thinking, I've got to get that video right. I've got to crack the right video somewhere. How do I do that? And every day I churn out another video, and I was creating an automated spiritual version of myself. Now then, the attachment to the automated spiritual tasks I was doing, I deemed spiritual, as in making videos, etc., became a prison in the form of an ego. But I didn't want to release them, because I became so lost in the world that I was in, with all these people needing help, all these people thanking me, all these people seeking help online, all these children depending on an organization that I was integral in the creation of. My brain got so confused and so lost that I started to genuinely, from a quite innocent place, lose track of the fact that this was all on God. And I started feeling it more and more of a burden on me. And it started making me sick. Because how can one man be responsible for so many children? It's not possible. You need God to be able to do that. You have to have God in the equation. And despite God's best efforts, I was stuck as an automated man creating these videos to try and get the money for the kids when I did not need to. I needed to restore my faith in God, but I was lost by then. And my environment was not conducive to find myself again. In getting sick, the environment became conducive because I was forced to be alone. But even during my sickness, I would push and then get so sick because I couldn't break the habit of being myself. The self that I'd created that wasn't correct. Because the self I want to be is the state of being that God can guide. The self I'd become is the mind's idea of what I have to do by taking responsibility onto myself and not leaving it on God. So no matter what I did, I couldn't release these habits. I couldn't release the automated version of myself making these videos, and it was making me extremely ill and crazy to some degree. And many of you saw it. We saw my ego coming out. We saw the way I changed my appearance, and this was all ego. It was also coming from a state of vulnerability, because I was so sick I felt terribly vulnerable all of a sudden. Then I lost my tools because I couldn't run. I could no longer get into the present moment. I ran every day to get into the present moment, to get light, to get with God. I couldn't do it anymore. And thus I got flung even further into the confusion of my own carnal mind and into my own new ego that I'd created. Now the problem I had was, even sitting here a few months ago, I believed that ego to be a necessity to continue serving God and to continue providing for the children. The ego convinced me, my spiritual ego convinced me I couldn't let go. It convinced me wholeheartedly, if you let go, you're going against God and you're going against the children. So do not let go, whatever you do, because the results will be disastrous. And I hung on, feeling trapped, feeling imprisoned, and screaming out to people from time to time, I'm so trapped by this. I even wrote a directive to my old board of trustees saying that there should never be an instance where somebody is fundraising alone on YouTube for a charity like this, because it's just too dangerously painful and and lonely for the person doing it. I wrote that. I physically wrote it. But I still wasn't conscious that the loneliness was the fact that I was cut away from my state of being most of the time because I was living in a new spiritual ego. And the spiritual ego convinced me that it was still the state of being that I had come to know so well, my time alone in nature. And very recently, God started hitting me because I was still enough to return to that state of being. And I was thinking, but I'm in the state of being. That's why I'm able to serve you. That's why I'm able to make these videos. And I was not. And he was hitting me harder, saying, no, get in the state of being. And I'm thinking, but I am in the state of being. That's how totally lost I got inside my spiritual ego. I believed I was there. I'd conceptualized the state of being in my head. I knew what it was. I've been there before. But I was not there. I was here in my ego, aware of the state of being, but not dwelling within it. I'd bolted it on outside of my new spiritual ego. Man, did this get complex at that point. It got really complex. But then God was on me to let go, to let go. And then I started letting go. I started breaking the habit of being who I'd become, breaking the habit of this ego bit by bit, by simply undoing the automated aspects of myself. And the very last thing I couldn't let go of was the overwhelming feeling that I must make videos and feel responsible. Thus, if I didn't make them and I didn't do this, my relationship with God would be over and damaged and the children would suffer. I couldn't let go of that because it felt like survival depended upon it. And that's how low I got in my consciousness, that I got into survival mode. You have survival, you have material comfort forming an ego, and then you have material comfort wanting to serve others. Those are the three stages. I had been in the last stage. I'd come down to the middle stage and created an ego around the comfort that I had based on spiritual topics, and then I dropped even further into carrying that ego down into a survival state. And due to my environment changing, where I wasn't under constant pressure, where I was able to think. In Tanzania, my life was hell for a while. I'd wake up in Featherstone, there'd be people waiting outside, they didn't care, have any space for empathy. The staff would not get organised at one point. They'd knock on the door, wake me up to try and get money to take someone to hospital because they'd forgotten to get it the day before we could afford an accountant. It was hell. My life was hell. And I couldn't think, and I was spinning everywhere, and my only reprieve was running. So I would run constantly. Every single day when I was tired, I'd run, because that was my reprieve from this insane environment that I was living in, allowed myself to live in. My wonderful Fritzy told me, you have to get out of this environment, and I did, and it started helping. But from that bottom layer, and I started realizing I'm feeling a state of survival, God threw me straight up to the top again, because I sat for 4 days with an overwhelming urge for isolation. This manifests itself in many ways. God gave me many opportunities. He's given me a chance to stay for free in Thailand, which I may take advantage of. He's given me a chance to stay for free in California, which I may take advantage of. He's also given me the opportunity to do it in Tanzania, to be still as a Maasai would and sit out in nature alone. In the rite of passage to become a Maasai warrior, you must sit alone under one tree and not move from there for an extremely long period of time. Now, I wouldn't do it that way. I would take my vehicle out into the bush, but I would never have human contact out there. Nobody would pass me by accident. It's the middle of nowhere. You've got more chance of a giraffe walking up to you than a human out there. And I'm mulling that over as a potential option. And I was hungry for it, and I started talking to Fritzy about it. And then for the first time in a long time, she stayed away from me. With Aslan, she went and stayed away from me. And when she stayed away from me, I sat exactly here, knowing on the cusp of letting go, and received a message from someone that I'd been really rude to whilst I wasn't well, and when they tried to contact me about having a message for me. They didn't get through to me for whatever reason. We both kind of took some ownership of it, me for being in a state that was not able to accept what was being said, and they not being able to communicate it in the right possible way. We've both grown, and God put us both back together. And sitting right here, right here. This lady had sent me recorded WhatsApp messages from a number I've never seen, and I never listened to my WhatsApp here, but I opened my WhatsApp as I sat here, I pressed play. And her message was very clear and very simple. And she spoke everything in the message out loud that I had realised myself to some degree. That my environment had wrecked me because I'd given and let go of what I believed to be true, that you can only give to others when you give to yourself. I stopped giving to myself. She pointed all of this out. And then almost as if my spiritual ego of survival that thought it had to post and had to do this and had to do that, was like it was a hood connected with buttons. And there was one button and it was flapping in the wind and it was ready to let go. And she just said, there's a message, and this message, after she said all of these things, my message from God is simple. You have to let go, and you have permission to let go. And as she did, the button came undone, and this hood that was hanging on me, this spiritual egoic hood of energy, took off. And with a gentle goodbye, it said to me, I'm so sorry that I didn't realize I was doing you a disservice and harm, and I'm going now. And when I replied to her, I cried. We both cried together. I recorded a message and cried during the recording of that message. I doubt I'll ever make it public because it's a very private issue, and I'm making it as public as possible here. And in doing that, I woke up to something unbelievably powerful. I woke up to the fact that I can return to a state of being. And that state of being doesn't contain any automated processes. And I am new to this. I am not perfect, and it was the best lesson I have learned in years. Because the freedom I experienced, and I went back to Fritzi and she said, I haven't felt God on you like this since the day I met you when you were living alone in Tanzania and nobody knew you were there. She said, I've not felt it on you. I've not felt you'd be able to explain things like this. I've not felt you be able to communicate, to flow like this, and to see into me, because I could see through Fritzi's lack of connection with her state of being that she'd formed around protecting herself from my own. And that was confirmation enough for me. And I spent days just in a very present, beautiful state of being, and my spiritual ego kind of came back and tried to refasten the button again, out of love, not out of evil or wrongdoing, out of love, out of, oh, are you okay there? Are you sure that that's right? Are we sure that it's going to allow for the children to be provided for and for God to talk to you if you let go of it? Are you positive? And it's coming in with a whisper, and it's coming from a loving place. But it's because the brain hasn't got a clue how to deal with these things, and that's why the brain can't. The carnal mind is enmity to the laws of God, as it is spoken in Christianity. The brain cannot possibly deal with spiritual matters. It's a collective happening with every single aspect of your sensory, intuitive and spiritual input and connection to the world that you find that state of being. And only in the state of beingness can you move forward with the true love that Christ wanted you to have. Because without it, you segregate your love. You judge. You cannot be as loving as me because you don't have the same theological belief set as me. You cannot be as loving as me because you do this. You cannot be loving as me because you eat meat. And it's absolutely unbelievable that these things are going to scare the crap out of me. Absolutely. I think you'll run out the trees. He did a U-turn as he saw me. A turn. You cannot believe how hard it is to love and care for people without being in that state of being. And if you conceptualize that state of being and you do not live within it, you will get very sick very quickly, and very clear, painful signs came, which I will write about in a book when time comes. Because I was telling the world, I was telling those close around me, help, I'm stuck, I'm trapped by this, I'm trapped, let me free. Nobody understood, because nobody was living in the state of being. Around me is my perception, which is not a criticism or an offence to somebody, but that is how it was. And thus I became thrown into the present moment with a vibrance that I've long not experienced, perhaps even more intense than it was before, because I have now learned a lesson beyond comprehension, which is I feel as humbly as I can, and I hope it's not my spiritual ego saying this, that I have learned how to look upon a spiritual ego to a deeper degree, and not that I can't form one, because that would be a lie, and that would be bull, but that I now have massive more levels of amount of awareness and tools that can help me to ensure I never form one again. And someone sent me a quote saying there's a name for it, the dreaded righteousness. And Alan Watts spoke of it too. Some of the worst people in the world are those who are doing yoga and feel that they are spiritually over the top of everybody else. But the biggest ego trap of my life was in relation to spirituality and God. And boy, did it take me for a ride, and boy, might it take me for a ride again. But right now, you might see it. There's a level of freedom within me from it. And long may it continue for as long as it possibly can, because I do not want to go back there. It played a role in my physical decline, my mental decline, everything. Because I developed a new carnal, godly mind. And just because you're living a life of service and you're sacrificing yourself and being the martyr towards God, as I know people doing so, doesn't mean you're free of an ego, especially if you judge others to not be as righteous as what you are. You're trapped in an ego trap. If you are, as my post said, if you're riding a bicycle because it's better for the environment, but you're judging others for not doing so, you're in an ego trap. If you're being a vegan and judging meat eaters for not joining you, based on your own superiority on a spiritual nature, not based on morality, you're in an ego trap. And thus, if you get into a space where you end up in life that people are seeking advice from you, and people are thanking you, and people are asking you to pray for them, or you're foreseeing things that others are not, and then somewhere within you, you take responsibility for those abilities, you're in an ego trap. And then that'll manifest deeper. It'll habituate survival into your ego trap, which is what I did. I have to make videos on spiritual matters to survive. Otherwise, how will the channel go viral and the kids get the help they need? And where's God in any of that? And that's what I needed all along. But I'm a very strong-minded individual. I'm a very strong-willed individual. And it took a lot for God to get through. And now He has. I'm watching that it doesn't reconnect because it's tried a few times, and it might have even reconnected now, and I'm speaking from an ego trap, but this is the journey I'm in, and I don't even know if it's possible to be free of the ego. I said yesterday, it's like holding a picture of you holding the same picture. It's never ending if you look into it, because every single time you look into the picture, there's another picture that's the same, and it just goes on and on and on. And I said maybe just being conscious of the fact that that is the state of the ego is enough. That it's never ending, that it's infinite. Maybe that is enough. But then again, maybe the fact I'm still wondering if that's enough means that it's not. And all I know is, though, however, that I feel free in a state of being. I don't feel obligated to do anything. I don't feel obligated to take responsibility. I just feel free in a state of being. And my obligation is not to harm others in this present moment with what I manifest. And for me, my obligation is to the family that I have in Tanzania as well. But in doing that, my obligation is to allow God to show me what has to happen. Because a human being, as we know from the first 20-something years of my life, has nil ability to pull off what I've pulled off in Tanzania, because I was just around while God was manifesting it around me. And I lost sight of that part by creating a spiritual ego, which was so sneaky. It's unbelievable that you can create an ego that makes you feel that without it you can't be in a state of being with God. Man. But what a relieving realization it was to become aware of it. Now let's see what the next ego attack is that comes at me. The mind will attack and try to form itself anew, John. I'm positive of it, and it might already be doing so. Maybe it already is with me sharing this video, who knows. But what I do know is that I am now once again watching. I'm watching carefully from this present moment, from this state of being. And as soon as I start feeling trapped and not free, I'm going to pause, I'm going to stop working, stop doing everything, and look deep and say what's causing it. Because more than likely, it's an ego trap. So, and before it gets out of control. That's why my environment will change in Tanzania. I will live away from Feather's Tail. I will give myself space to give to myself before I give to others. I will not live as the martyr anymore. However appealing and romantic it is to the rest of the world that I refuse point blank to do so, because it's not in the best interest of the children or the charity to do that. I have to be going in as a team and sharing the burden. Otherwise, if I drop down dead, who's going to look after the children? It has to be that way, and it will be that way. And I'm grateful that I know it. God bless, guys. Bye.